and it's now recording. Okay, I'm going to share my screen just to go through the intro parts. Okay, so welcome to this event that is being held as part of the Agile20Reflect Festival. Hopefully you've had an amazing time so far. We're coming to the end of the festival, but not the end of what we've seen created. I think there's so much interest in it that we really want to see where it can go next. We actually have over 800 events in the festival now. It turns out we've accidentally created the biggest online festival of all time. And thankfully it's about a subject we all like, which is Agile, or at least all interested in. If you're using Twitter, please use the MyAgile20Reflect hashtag. It will actually be used to grab people's opinions, to see what they've said about the festival, and allow us to inform how it went and be able to look back upon everything. The website's still up, so please use it and go and check out some stuff for the weekend. Also, we are not having a closing ceremony, we're having a fiesta forever, because actually I think we've started something quite special here. Regardless of your preference of the flavor of Agile, we can all join together around Agile, and I think that's quite spectacular. The whole festival has been set up without costs, and the Red Team actually shared in their talk about why we didn't accept money, about the impact of what it would have done to the festival. However, if you have a spare coin or two, just put it in the slot below. No, if you have any, if you'd like to support it, we're doing this through GoFundMe, and that's just to pay for licenses and some advertising. We also have a code of conduct. It's really essential that the festival is open and safe. If you have a problem with what you're experiencing, please protect yourself first and foremost. Second, let us know that there has been a problem, and we will investigate it and ensure that we find out what happened and how it's affected people, because we really want people to have good experiences here. Last slide. The festival is definitely now open, and I will stop sharing from there. So just to say why this session. So I set up this session because it's, to me, there is a major problem, or has been a major problem with Agile over the years, that it has been an imposition. It has been forced upon people, and that for the most part, their experience of it has been either something they can bat away as another fad, or it's something that has been pushed upon them to engage with, and they're trying to find ways to cope with it. There has not been psychological safety in transformation. There has not been safe discussion forums. And people, although that was the purpose of the original manifesto, have been the last people involved in the discussion around how change is affecting them. And so that's why this question around how Agile is affecting people has come up. So I see that Dr. Stefanie is here. Do you want to introduce yourself? So we have Dr. Stefanie and Dr. Gail, who will be sharing today, and then we'll have some question times. The chat is open if you want to speak or put comments in that could lead to questions. But at this time, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Stefanie.
Hi, everyone. Hold on, I have to adjust the light here a little bit. Oh, well. Hi, I wasn't prepared to introduce myself just now. I thought we'll do that right before my speech after Gail, but that's fine. So I'm absolutely glad to be here. I see that the Agile20Reflect Festival is really like coming a long way, and it's great to see all the events and of course to be part of it. My background is I'm a psychologist, and I'm working since about 15 years as a consultant. I own my own business, manager in talent management, different countries. And the thought that always I carried with me since university is, how do we make work better? And I am equipped based on what I learned at the university. And then a few years back, I got in touch more and more with the agility and the framework around it. And I got so excited once I started realizing and recognizing a lot of the principles, a lot of the logics we psychologists are preaching since decades, finally getting a popular, sexy frame with Agile, which I mean, it was introduced in areas it hasn't been introduced before. And I just really appreciated seeing that. Yeah, so that much I think about me for now, and I'd be glad to then take over the stage right after Gail's presentation.
I think you're muted, Karl.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I have the I think you've muted thing from that. Will everyone will go for saying for the next 20 years. Sorry, Dr. Gail, would you like to take over and introduce yourself and then go with your presentation?
Sure, I'll go ahead and go with my presentation because the introduction to myself is within the presentation. So I think I'll just go ahead and start. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll get. All right. We can see my screen, and let me move the thumbnail out of the place. Looks like somebody's coming in. So welcome everyone. I'm really thrilled to have been invited to this session from Karl Smith on new ways of working the human component. This has been some thought leadership that has really been near and dear to me throughout the pandemic. And actually today's a special occasion for me because it is the official launch of my book as well. And my book is titled Leading the Empathic Agile Enterprise. It's available as both an ebook as well as a paperback on Amazon. Just finished it up last week and put the finishing touches on it. A lot of the material from today is in that book, along with other things. And hopefully I will be getting a lot more ideas and content to add to that. But once again, Karl, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this very important topic as we move past the pandemic and move into an area of recovery. I think that really looking at the different ways of working the human component in everything we do, not even just at work or within organizations, but just personally, is going to be really important and at the foremost of people's minds going forward. So a little bit about me. You can see all of my certifications here and all of that, but I would like to start out really with more of a journey and just talk about how I got here. My background really started out in the visual arts. Before I went into computer science, I actually went to art school for 2 years, and I was a graphic artist and I was a designer for a while, and really enjoyed that. And then I ended up going into computer science and using a lot of my creativity there. Worked up here in the Silicon Valley and went to a lot of the technology companies, but I've always been a creative soul at heart. So I do like things that are graphic, and I do like things that use a lot of design mapping and mind mapping and things like that. So this presentation will include a lot of those kinds of ideas and that kind of a mindset. And then you can see all of my certifications here. I am an active member of the PMI. I'm a member of the Silicon Valley chapter, have been a past board member. I am a certified Discipline Agile Scrum Master and Discipline Agilist, and have been doing some work with the Discipline Agile thought leadership, etc. And then I've also been involved with the Agile Alliance since about 2011, have been presenting at many of the Agile conferences, have been a reviewer, have been a track chair, and actually a program chair for the XP conference, and then also involved in the Scrum Alliance. So I am very involved in the Agile community. I am, again, really interested in everything creative and with the arts, and a lot of the thought leadership and the work that I've followed has been in that area, and that's what I would like to explore in this presentation. So the outline of my presentation is going to be covered as followed. We'll talk about really what empathic leadership is. You're probably all wondering what the heck does that mean, and we're certainly going to get into that. And then we'll get into the why of it. Why is it important to individuals? Why is it important to teams? Why is it important to organizations? And talk about all those things and all the results that can be realized as a result of really using empathy in the workplace. And then we'll talk about some characteristics of empathic agile leaders and get into that. And then we'll go through empathy mapping. What I'm going to do is just really show you some existing empathy maps. At the end of my presentation, I'll give you links to my mural board that you can look at on your break. But given such a short session, we don't really have time to go into a whole empathy mapping exercise. Now, if I was in one of my UC courses or something else where we were doing a workshop, we could be going at this all day long, or maybe for several days if we were really getting into the nitty-gritty of doing an empathy exercise. But what you'll get in this presentation will just be an overview of what the benefits could be from doing such an exercise. So let's get into it. So what is empathic agile leadership, you might ask? It could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Basically, in the hard times that we've experienced over the last year with the pandemic, managing the change in organizations has been a really difficult task. And often leaders have no idea of just where they failed when things have gone awry and things are falling apart due to all the dramatic and catastrophic changes. And leaders, all have different skills. One could be a great strategist, one could be a great visionary and a great business leader. But if they lack empathy, then they really cannot realize the potential of their organization. And that's really what's important here. And so what's missing really is the ability to manage change by using empathic agile leadership. So just what is empathic agile leadership? What does it really mean? Is it being sympathetic to another point of view? Is it using your intuition? Is it listening? The answer is that it's all of these. Leading with empathy is a bit of a loose term and it's kind of squishy, but you're going to know it when you see it. And not only is the empathic agile leadership for leaders, but it's also for anyone in the organization. Anyone can lead with empathy, whether you're a Scrum Master, whether you're a team member, or whether you're the CEO of the organization. You should all be in focus on really making sure that you practice empathy every single day. And how do you do this? Listening is really one of the key skills of practicing empathy as a leader in your workplace. And not only do you listen with your ears, but you listen with your mind, you listen with your gut, and you also listen with your heart. And when you think about it, and when you hear things with all of these different elements, you might get a different answer. I've gone through the empathy mapping exercise where you've, got what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, etc. And you end up getting completely different results if you look at it from a different perspective. So really using all of these senses together at the workplace in order to listen to what other people are saying is going to be important. And again, last but not least, one of the most important things, again, is listening with your heart and really having that empathy and being able to really walk in the other person's shoes and realize what it is that they're feeling. So why? In terms of the why, you need empathic agile leadership. Really, it's very focused on the people and culture element. And this is becoming more and more important to organizations as they're really recovering post-COVID, is to really be focusing on the people and culture area. And some organizations have gotten this right for a number of years. Everyone knows Southwest Airlines, the Love Airline, and how they've always been focused on their employees, really having a fun experience, being able to enjoy and acknowledge not only their customers and build value around their customers, but also build value and make their employees happy to work there every day. Other organizations and leaders have also done this well. Sir Richard Branson, another airline, Virgin Airlines, he does the same thing. He gets on the flights with Virgin Airlines. He really sees and walks in the shoes of his flight attendants and sees the day-to-day operations of what's going on and makes adjustments, etc. Not sure if any of you remember a show from 10 years ago or not. It was called Undercover Bosses. It's where the CEOs actually ended up working as, maybe a factory worker or driver or some other minimum wage job, and disguised themselves and actually went in the trenches with the employees for a period of time. But what they came out of it with was a sense of really what the pains were with the organization, and really having some really clear ideas on how to fix the processes based on their working on in the trenches with all of the individuals. So this was really important as well. So again, really making that people-centric culture will lead to all these other things. It leads to improved customer value, it leads to improved customer satisfaction, and ultimately it leads to improved ROI. Again, getting into the why of it, again, the improved productivity. There's been numerous research studies on this in terms of from a long period of time ago that many researchers have done. One of the first research studies was the GE illumination studies, where they found that if in the workplace you actually improve the lighting, that the employees were actually more productive. And that was one of the first research studies that were out there that proved that. There's been tons of other work since then. In the Agile world, Esther Derby's done a lot of work around this by really looking at really how people are feeling and really making sure that you understand how people are feeling before you can actually act and before you can actually gain any traction with the organization. And again, you're getting into all of these areas with employees in terms of sharing their lived experiences, working in the trenches, and really understanding where it is that they need to go with them. And so you're really walking with them side by side. Again, results, we talked about this. You're building a happier culture. You're building a culture of really being not only involved or focused on customer value, but involved in the value for your employees, which leads to that customer value, which is first and foremost in the Agile world. And so it does actually result in increased value and better products and productivity. Also, the culture of empowerment, by working with your employees and understanding their pains and helping them realize how they can fix the problems themselves and working with them as a team, you're actually building a culture of empowerment where you're actually allowing them to solve their own problems, but working with them and making them feel like you're part of the team rather than a leader that's above them. So again, you're walking side by side with the team. Also building a culture of safety, which is more and more important as we move past COVID-19. And by safety, I mean both psychological safety and physical safety. So physical safety, we'll need to make sure in the workplace, things like taking temperatures, making sure people are social distance, creating whole new workplaces, working from home. That's the physical safety. But the psychological safety is very important for empowerment, as well as building the Agile cultures to make people feel safe to speak up. And this has been a concept that's been alive in Agile for a long period of time. Just even in your basic Scrum stand-ups or ceremonies, that if people don't feel safe or they feel like they're going to be reprimanded for coming up and speaking, then they're not going to actually become a productive member of the team. So you do have to make sure that you're building that culture of safety, and one that people are actually going to go in and be willing to participate 100%. And then the result in that, again, increased customer value. So again, this is down at number 4. It is a result that will lead to customer value, but it's really looking at that people centricity first and all the cultural elements to get to number 4. And then number 5, the increased productivity, which is another end gain in terms of really looking at what leading with empathy will do for you. So some things you can do in terms of qualitative, there's something called the Cynefin framework that was basically David Snowden with Mary Boone has a article on this back 20 years ago, I think it was, in Harvard. David Snowden is the thought leader for this, but you can actually use Cynefin framework to get from this area here. On the right-hand side of the quadrant, you've got like really what your good practices are and your best practices are in the organization. So these are things that you, if you're very clear down here, then this is processes that you do every day. So these are things that you know how to do, like maybe your stand-ups and other processes within your organization. But then you're moving into the realm of when you get into complex and chaotic, then you do have to use more of empathic leadership to be able to lead your organization out of this and be able to get them to be able to move from here you're working with the processes by sensing, categorizing, and responding to on the left-hand side here where you're in the emergent or the complex environment, really being able to probe, sense, and respond. So that's where you can use elements of qualitative research in terms of interviewing people, working side by side with them, really having shared experiences and really getting a sense of what the workplace is like before you can actually respond on a dime and respond quickly to chaos in the workplace. So while the Cynefin framework is the framework, the actual tool that you can use is by using actually empathy maps and other tools that we'll talk about a little bit down the road in this presentation. So qualitative research, again, is a way of really looking at the human experience. Traditional qualitative research, which I'm showing here, is really getting in the trenches with individuals to be able to understand their lived experiences. So that really is the root of qualitative research. When I got my doctorate, my dissertation actually was in a qualitative research area where I had to conduct 20 interviews in depth and then get themes out of those. And then the themes would filter up into solutions and then recommendations for the study. So that's what you end up doing in qualitative research here. And what you see here are a few different types of qualitative research. And in phenomenological, which was the type of research that I did when I actually wrote my dissertation, is where you find the essence of the phenomena. And you do that by extracting the themes and then coming out to one major theme that really sort of ties things in. So again, you're understanding the people that you're talking to and coming to a conclusion on that. Case studies are based on past experiences, usually of organizations. So for example, if I wanted to look at different leaders in information technology, I might look at some case studies, for example, with Apple, with Facebook, with some of the other leaders, and see what the best practices are that they are doing, and then be able to base my my results on what they're working with. And with this book that I wrote, I actually did do a lot of case studies, and I got my results based on looking at some of the best practices in industry and reading a lot of the articles and things like that from Harvard Business Review. And then you've got ethnography, which is sharing lived experiences. And this is where you would actually go and live in the culture. So for example, if I wanted to do something on how to implement an agile transformation in Africa, I would actually go and live in Africa for a period of time, work side by side with the group, and then get my results and my insights from actually sharing the day-to-day lived experiences with them in terms of how they operate and how they run. And then we talked about the Cynefin framework. Again, this is a tool that you could also use to go through and navigate the human element using an agile framework. And so this is, again, really getting in and looking at how the organization and the people in the organization are working, and then really making recommendations based on a compassionate and a caring look at the organization, where you're really listening and understanding what it is that the organization needs. Some characteristics of empathic leaders. Based on some case studies that I looked at, again, I looked at some technology companies that were practicing different areas of empathy and empathy mapping and doing some work in that area. And really some of the key areas for a person that's in empathic leadership, one of the first ones is to practice self-control. So to really make sure that they take a moment, they take that moment to pause. And then when they're in that pause, that they're really listening. And again, listening with all of their facilities in order to really come up with a sense of where the organization is at. Again, being very hands-on, so working side by side with the individuals in the organization and getting a sense of what their day-to-day problems are, talking to them, listening to them, sharing celebrations with them, really being part of the team is critical to really being an empathic agile leader. Being self-aware. Now, this is very important to really any area of leadership, is to know your own strengths and weaknesses. If you don't know what those are, then you don't really know how to navigate, and you don't know how to fix the organization. Because if you can't fix yourself and you're a hot mess yourself, then how can you really go in and help anyone else? So again, there's all kinds of tools that you can use. When I teach my UC classes, we do a lot of different leadership assessments, or we do other kinds of assessments where the person can really assess their strengths and weaknesses, and then be able to map out a journey for themselves as a leader, really having that knowledge. And again, you don't necessarily have to be a director or CEO to use any of these self-awareness tools. For anyone in the organization, if you have more self-awareness of what your strengths and weaknesses are, then you can certainly do a better job in just even in team environments for Agile. So again, this is really for anyone. It's not just for leaders. Being very creative, so being able to find some out-of-the-box solutions and really find a way to be able to do the probe, sense, and respond that we talked about with the Cynefin framework, where you're able to work through those areas of chaos and come up with something new and come up with it quickly. As we've seen in this last year, again, with all of the different things that have happened in our changing world, with COVID-19, with the social unrest, with climate change, fires, all those other things happening, leaders have really had to respond very quickly and be able to shift their entire organizations around and end up changing their processes. And again, really having a sense for what people are feeling, what their pains are, does help in going through and not only fixing the organizational problems, but also coming up with maybe new products that can realize improved customer value very quickly. An example of this I can give is some of the food service people. Many, as we know, many of the restaurants all went out of business because they couldn't have people seated there. They tried to do some other things according to mandate, fixing the outdoors, et cetera, but still closed down. But some of the ones that offered actually basically pickup of foods that were coming direct from the wholesaler, or offering different kinds of products that were shipped to the home or things like that, ended up thriving. So they were able to actually pivot and then come up with something new using sort of a creative out of the box technique to come up with a net new product to be able to revolve around the chaos and then move into new areas of productivity. And so those are the people that are going to end up filtering to the surface as we move post pandemic. Exterior perspectives. So again, this is really having a systems thinking hat on, really looking at the whole environment in terms of what is it, what are the issues that are going on around you, really looking at that daily and doing the check daily. So leaders not only have to meditate and know themselves and have their own direction, but really get a sense for what's going on in the outside world and be able to pivot on that quickly. So being, tuned to news, reading the different trade journals, also just finding out what's going on with their people in the organization on a regular basis will help them have that mindset. So they have to be very involved on a number of levels and really being out there probing in a number of areas. So let's pause for a minute and talk a little bit about empathy mapping. So empathy mapping is a tool. It's one of many tools that can help you to work and become empathic in your environment and be able to use empathy. It's not the only tool, but it is one that we'll focus on for this specific talk. And so when you're looking at empathy maps, they can be used to work the human component. And often where I like to start here is really at the bottom, because really at the bottom line here, you're sharing lived experiences. So again, as I talked about in the different areas of the side-by-side leadership and the qualitative research, you're really getting in the trenches with the individuals and understanding how they're feeling. So you can use the empathy map actually as a tool to understand directly how they're feeling by going through an empathy mapping exercise. And where I like to start out is actually by looking at specific personas. So you might identify a persona in your organization. One that I'll talk about later is maybe a disabled person. So what if you have a disabled person in your environment? Maybe you have a blind team member. And so what are their pains? What are their frustrations? What kind of obstacles are standing in their way? What are their risks and what are their strategies? And then the gains of your organization or the gains of the person. What can they get by someone responding and understanding and having empathy to their restrictions and being able to act on them? There are other talents that this person may have that can actually benefit the organization. And we'll get in and talk about that when I show you the empathy map exercise. But it is not only just an individual gain, but it's actually a gain that can end up being realized by the organization and maybe come up with something new that will add value to the customer as you go through your customer journey mapping. And then here you've got other areas of the empathy map. So again, hearing. Again, you're kind of hearing with your ears here where you're asking them questions like, what are your influences? What are they saying? What are they doing? Et cetera, et cetera. And, what kind of hobbies do they have? What kind of other things do they work with? But also, again, as I started talking about getting into how they think and feel, like what's important to them, what are their aspirations, what are their worries, et cetera, et cetera. And then going in and really having a visual look at their environments, really seeing them, seeing what their environment's like, what's going on in their world, what matters to them the most, and really having an impact on that. And then what is it that they say or do? What's their attitude? What are some of the things you hear them saying all the time? What are their behaviors, et cetera, et cetera? So traditionally, these empathy maps are used to create customer personas so that you're creating a product or a service, but you can actually use them for your employees in your environment to rework the human component. And so that's what I'm talking about here, is to use this tool that traditionally has been used in building products and services internally within your organization to get a deeper understanding of the individuals in your organization, and then be able to act on that and be able to make organizational process changes moving forward based on the results of this empathy mapping exercise, along with other things you could do in terms of qualitative interviews and other ways, other touch points for your employees in your organization. So looking at this, I had Joseph Ossoff actually drafted me this nice canvas here. You could start out with a certain type of an empathy canvas where you kind of would start out blank here. You could use a tool like Mural, which I'll give you the link afterwards on the break that you can just take a look if you have time. Again, if we were going to get into a whole empathy mapping exercise, it would take us a longer period of time than we have for this meeting. So I'm just kind of giving you an overview. But what you see here on the right, and again, where I like to start is really with the pains. What pains is that person feeling? What are the wins or the gains that they can get? And then again, getting into sort of what they're thinking and feeling, what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and what they're saying and doing. And so when I just took a look at it for this exercise, I looked at a few different personas that might be of interest. Maybe you might have on your team, you know, an Agile team member of color. So somebody that's not white on your team, and maybe some of the ways that they might be feeling and some of the things that you would need to do to work with that person in order to maximize your productivity and your performance. And then what if you had a disabled Agile team member? How would you work with them? What are the types of things that you would do to not only maximize their performance, but maximize the organizational performance? You also have a persona of a siloed middle manager. Maybe this person's a middle manager that you know, is a departmental manager, and they're having certain pains within your Agile transformation in terms of not understanding where people are going and what they're doing. And then maybe you have an executive of color. So you've got a newly hired executive in your organization, and they're not, you know, they're not white, and it's sort of how they're feeling. So the persona that I want to focus in first on is going to be the disabled team member, and I have them circled. So the first thing I would do is look at their pains here. So one of the pains of this person, and it might be one of the pains of many, is that this person is really unable to work without some assistance or some accommodation. And that's usually why, you know, in the HR questionnaires and things like that, you know, they're always asking that question if somebody needs reasonable accommodation or whatever it is that they need in order to be productive. And then really making sure that management follows through with that. But that's really just at the top level there. But what about if you have a person like that on your Agile team, and maybe they're not really being as productive as the other team members? Then, you know, how would you work with them and get them to that level? And then also in terms of your organization as well. So again, you want to empower that person. So the gain that you could have from this person is that you're empowering them, and that you're really recognizing that they really have a unique talent, and making them feel like they're unique and that they're treasured within your organization and within your teams, and making sure that their contributions are heard. A lot of times in terms of having someone that is a, you know, stands out a bit more, that's a disabled person in some way, then, you know, maybe some of the other things that they're facing. And when we get into here, maybe what they're hearing is that they're hearing people whispering behind their backs. You know, they're asking about that person and like, what are they saying about me? And you know I stand out, I'm different, and they always kind of have that shame about them because they are a different person. So again, really always focusing on the gains there of making that person feel like that they are unique and empowering them to really be able to display their unique talents by not only giving them the right accommodations, but the right level of support is really important in working with these types of individuals. What they might be thinking and feeling is that they are a bottleneck, that they're in the way. So, you know, maybe they're always feeling like they're kind of in the way, or that they stand out, you know, things like that. So they're, you know, there could be multiple things that they're thinking and feeling, but the one that I chose is really that they're feeling like that they're in the way. And what they're seeing too is like maybe they're in team meetings and things like that, and maybe other members of the teams aren't making eye contact with them. So maybe people aren't looking at them, they're not acknowledging them because they're, you know, they don't want to confront the issue, and or they don't know how to work with the person or deal with the person on their team, and understand how to really empower them and empower the entire team. So there has to be additional coaching there in the workplace when you have unique people or challenged people on your teams or within your organization, to not only give them the accommodations, but also, again, to make them feel part of the team and get past some of the pains that they're having. Again, they might be saying or doing, you know, I'm okay, I'm not a burden. Again, so they don't want to feel like they're really a burden to the team, so they might withdraw. So maybe somebody like this might just end up withdrawing. They're going to do enough to get by. They've got their accommodations. They'll get their little bit of work done, but they don't really engage in the teams, and they don't really engage in the organization because they kind of just feel like they're in the way all the time. So it is a unique situation. Again, there's all kinds of other personas here on the map. We don't really have enough time in this whole presentation, but I'm decided to just focus on the disabled person, and you can look at some of the other ones on the break on my canvas. Again, this is a starting of some personas here. There could be many other personas within your organization, within your teams. You know, if you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, you could even use this type of thing, or you could be a top-end leader where you're looking at, you know, different people on your leadership team, or you're doing higher level planning. So you could use this empathy canvas for a lot of different uses at any level, really, throughout your organization. So wrapping up here, I do have a Menti poll set up. We've talked about a lot of things in terms of being an empathic leadership. So what can you do to practice empathic leadership? You could use tools such as empathy mapping. You could certainly do more listening. You can do more going out and doing qualitative research. But I'm just wondering what your takeaway is here in terms of what you think you could do within your organization to be an empathic leader. So I have a poll set up in menti.com. And if you enter the code 9108421, you will see the question. So there's three, so you have three responses you can give in terms of doing that. So if you could just take a moment and do that, and then I'll share the word map with you before I wrap up. I'm just checking it. Can everybody get into Menti okay? Can you get in, Carl?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Okay.
Straight in there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to do a bit of a word cloud to have a takeaway before we wrap up, but I'm just wondering, you know, just sort of in terms of using my own listening skills, I want to know what people have gotten out of this or what they think that they could do. I'll give it a couple more minutes. Go into my Menti. See how the Menti poll's going here. Hang on a second. I'm going to do a stop share for a minute so I can see the. Aha. So let me. So here's what I'm getting. Looks like everybody got listen.
So we've got some time now for some questions if people would like to ask.
Yeah, that's fine. So let's go ahead and do this. I just want to say something in closing, and then we'll take the questions
Sure.
if that's okay. I know it was a little bit of a hard close there. So just really, what can you do to practice the empathic leadership? You can use tools such as empathy maps, but again, really the active listening. So not only creating the strategic roadmaps or being involved in processes and tools, but really listening, living in the trenches with your people and sharing lived experiences can really help to build this concept of empathy within your organization and really be able to realize new areas of productivity. And with that, I'll go ahead and close, leave some time for some Q&A, and then we'll go ahead and I guess take our break, and I can share the mural link during break.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or observations that they want to bring up?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Terence.
Oh, hi. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks, Gail. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Very meaningful. And I wanted to ask, what if you are in a position where you're using empathetic or listening skills?
Mm-hmm.
You're having problems dealing with those who are your superiors, who are above you, in terms of implementation.
So you're using listening skills, but you're having problems with your superiors. Is that the question?
Right.
Like, how do you work with the?
Yeah.
By having conversations with the superiors and understanding what their issues are. So it's listening at a different level. So you're listening at the employee level, but obviously there's some kind of a reservation that they have that maybe you weren't aware of or that you need to know about. So I would delve into it and dive right into it with the leaders and find out what kind of issues they were having and try to work with them and coach them out of whatever problems that might happen to be. So you have to listen up as well as down. So not only down in the trenches, but also up.
Okay.
Leadership
I'm
level.
just wanting to acknowledge that pain point as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good point. It is. There were a couple of personas there that were more at the executive level as well, but it is definitely a very important point. So thank you for that.
So Scott's got a question.
Okay.
Do you want to voice it yourself, Scott?
Yes, I just got myself off mute, back from the dog walk. Yeah, I was going to ask, on empathy maps, would you recommend that to Scrum Masters looking to map the challenges of a team of 8? Or do you think it's important to have individual personas as you've described?
Yeah, so is your question like, should you do it at the team level or?
Yeah, does that, in your experience, does that become problematic, or what would your recommendations be?
Yeah, I think you could certainly do a team map, but have it at the individual level. So like, who are all the individual people within your team? So, and look at their basic personas. You could do certainly a team persona too, just to kind of get an idea of sort of the composition of the team, but then the team really consists of the people that are in the team. And so it would be more unique in terms of figuring out the challenges and how to solve those. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
The team members could change. The team members could change. So you could certainly have something that's really more in terms of a different kind of tool, I would say, for more of your working agreements and more of the team personality, but the individual personas within the team would be, I think, best mapped on an individual basis with an empathy map.
So I've got a quick question.
Okay.
So it's a two-parter. Sorry, everyone. I'm trying to get two for the price of one. The first part is who brings you in, and secondly, how much resistance do you get from people who didn't bring you in? For this kind of.
Who brings you in to do what? To do
supporting leadership in adopting an empathetic approach.
Oh, okay. So like who in the organization? Well, ideally, it would be HR, but really, HR isn't enough. So it should really come throughout the organization. So it should come from really top level leadership and then be communicated throughout the organization, just like you would in Agile transformation. It just really is part of transformation and part of people transformation and people support. So although it would be, perhaps sponsored by HR, it should really start at the top, be well communicated, and then work through the entire organization.
And then who gives the most resistance?
Yeah, I would say that depends, to be honest with you. I've seen a lot of different scenarios of who would give the most resistance in terms of empathy. In some organizations, it could be at the leadership level. In some organizations, it could be at the team level. So it just depends, I would say, on the organization.
Thanks. Is there any other questions?
Was the question from the chat answered?
Yes, the one that Scott put in.
Yep. Okay. Then I have like maybe it's a question, maybe it's not. I guess we'll see. One thing that I have sort of picked up like a long time ago is, once I was realized the importance of culture and these kinds of things. I had the idea of trying to, borrow things from anthropology and archaeology that I granted learned in high school, not graduate school,
right.
anything like that. And started trying to apply a lot of those concepts, particularly when I was trying to, go into a particular organization within my company. And this was just basic, process improvement type stuff or process design, before there was a manifesto and things like that. And I would try and use some things that I had learned there. And then I kind of thought of, when I'm going through all of their various artifacts to learn stuff, that's a form of archaeology. I'm wondering if there are specific techniques from either of those disciplines that have been incorporated into the stuff that you've been developing here. So that would be more of that different.
That would be more of like the ethnographic research that I was talking about. I think where you're going with this, where you actually go and actually live, in the culture, or live with the people, or live with the. So I use more of a case study to really be looking at this, where I looked at different technology organizations and how they were doing it and how they were addressing empathy in the workplace, and looked at some best practices from there.
I mean, things like cultural relativism or some other terms I can't remember.
Yeah. But I would sure love to go follow up. And actually, once the travel restrictions are lifted post-COVID, I think I'm a bit constrained to do that right now. But I would love to go do an ethnographic study somewhere and actually see how maybe they're doing empathy in a different country. Maybe even in Scotland or the UK, anywhere. I'm dying to travel, so.
I think what we were doing was more like what Lean calls go and see. It's not like I went there and,
Yeah, right. Yeah, that comes from the old Lean. Yeah, the old
Lean. We might have a series of workshops where we try and get,
the Kaizen and all that.
And you could do a mapping of there, but on some occasions,
exactly.
I'm over there and watch them or observe them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like the Kaizen and doing all that to go see. Yeah. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So I'm aware of those types of things.
Okay.
But no, this was all case studies and all that. Like I said, there's a bit of a constraint right now with COVID, but I certainly would like to do some follow-up research and actually go live in the various organizational cultures and see what they're doing.
I've typically seen that type of thing more for UI design rather than process, or I'll call it the organizational ecosystem discovery work type of stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
So
anyone?
I was just actually going to say that I published a book last year because I came from UX into Agile, because for me, well, first off, Agile stole our user stories and I wanted to find out why. And we'd stolen them from marketing. So there is a natural progression between user experience and Agile. And, you know, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's certainly very interesting. I was just going to say that I've kind of allowed for a comfort break in the session. I don't know if people want to take it or not, but a 2-hour session can be quite heavy duty on people. So can I get a show of hands that people want to take the break? And if not, we would carry on. Okay. I'll get one hand to take a break.
You mean
So,
show of hands under the reactions?
Yeah, on the reactions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm getting confusing messages from Scott. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. If you want to stay and chat, great. If you don't, you can grab your now semi-cold dinner and have a couple of bites or whatever you need to do.
And I put my mural board link in the chat if anybody just wants to look at it. It's just a rough board of what I showed in the slide, so you can certainly review it, and it has a few things and a few ideas.
So we found a technical problem, probably something to do with me and how I set this up, but you can't copy links from the from the chat. So
okay.
I can click on this though.
You can click on it. Oh, that's great. As long as you can click on it, that's fine.
Me copy, but I think I can click.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then I'll put the link for my book in the chat as well. So if anybody is interested in my book, it is out on digital as well as paperback.
Okay, so we'll be back in action at 7:10.
Alrighty, great.
So in 10 minutes.
Well, 8 now. We've been talking for 2.
Karl, this is Stefanie.
Hiya.
Could you let me share the screen? I want to try something.
You should be a co-host. Oh, wait a minute, you're not. That's weird. That's strange. I'm sure it's made you a... You are a co-host. You should be able to just share.
Okay, hold on.
I'm just going to pause the recording.
I got it, yeah.
Okay. Kind of just past the... I feel a bit like an authoritarian person because I'm saying exact times, but if you want to start out, Dr. Stefanie.
Okay, hope everyone is back from their little breaks, if you guys took them or not. Karl, I like what you said in the beginning. The Agile Manifesto really is around people, and yet what we often see in practice when organizations are trying to transform, the very last people they think about including in the transformation are actually the people meaning the value creating persons in the organization. So those people who actually interact with the customer or with the are sitting on the interfaces to the outside. And I think part of that problem is that the agile organization, they promise people to be more empowered, to be able to be faster, to adapt faster, to be able to really take into account individual and specific customer feedback. So they kind of lure you in the idea of you're going to get more power and you're going to reduce hierarchy. We might get rid of the one or the other manager, but then what happens? And what I see in transformations often is that leaves a big vacuum, which is basically setting the organization up to fail in the transformation. And now this is, or my approach to the new concept about the human component is to start there, to make sure this vacuum doesn't happen and to make sure people are empowered from the start on. What you hear from me today is a part of my newest book. I got a copy here. You see it later in the slides too, if you're interested. You'll also find the blog post with the Agile Business Consortium if you want to just quickly read up on it. So going back to this idea, and Gail, I liked your focus on leadership, saying, well, leadership is no longer necessarily command and control. It does require interpersonal skills now. It does require to meet on equal footing and be empathetic, understand the needs of the people, and be able to address them. However, what are we going to do if there are less leaders? Who's gonna take this important role? So what we see just initially, hold on, is the question, what's happening now? We ask, we want to be empowered, we want to empower our teams, we want self-organizations. So do leaders step up, or do leaders step down, or do we step up? Now follow me through here. This is our leader. And now we get the rest of the organization, or the team, the employees, individual contributors, however. So what's happening is traditionally we have a split of roles between the two. Just to go through a few things, the leader is supposed to be thinking big, while the employees are more thinking about details. I see my format is screwed up a little bit. I hope we'll get through this. We have goal setting as a leadership task. Achieving the goals is then up to the teams. We have the big picture versus the details. The leader is the one who's supposed to raise the bar while the team is busy achieving or reaching the bar. We get the vision on the one hand, we get the work on the other hand. So now what are we going to do? Are we going to step up and take on those additional, I added here the servant and the coach if you wanted those agile most popular leadership ideas. So what are we going to do? We're going to take them on. How is this going to work, and how can that work? So let's see how agile organizations do it. We see it's successful. It can work to operate in a way that people are actually empowered to do so. And how they do it is they establish a way of working that supports agility on every level throughout the organization. So the big characteristics, if you look into agile organizations or progressive organizations who obviously have a high degree of business agility, might not call themselves agile. They provide, first of all, a meaning to the employees. They do that through a purpose, a very popular thing right now. They have to provide orientation, because the more self-directed and self-led people are, the more they need a long-term focus, so initiatives are aligned. That's what we have the vision for. And then we have customer centricity for every individual, as a measure of our success. And this is usually formulated within the mission in the organization. That gives us a direction in the company. And on the other hand, what we also know about agile organizations is they are very stable, actually, stabilizing agility through structures and governance that helps to maintain speed and nimbleness in the organization. And now in the middle, you see as a result, the organizational agility, a gray box. I didn't want to do it, a black box, not over exaggerating, but what's in here? What's in the gray box? What's really ensuring that agility is happening in the organization. And you see it here in the back. This is what we would refer to as the organizational culture. And some of the discussions already went ahead thinking about culture and so on, Gail, after your talk. So I'm glad to be able to link in here. So let's first think about culture, the Agile culture. Do we need that or not? And the funny thing is, if you look into research, I think the earliest one I found was maybe 15 years ago, a review saying that the biggest challenge in transformation is the culture. And here's just a collection of quotes. This is from McKinsey here, saying the one biggest challenge in Agile transformations is the way of working, the culture of the organization. It goes as far as Harvard Business Review just recently said, culture has become a strategic priority. Yet another study, you see it here at Forbes, has listed culture as the most difficult hurdle to overcome. And I do like, that's an older Forbes article from 2011, where they outline that what happens if you change the organization and we forget about the culture, it's just a matter of time till the existing culture just basically sucks in the attempts to change and end up the same way it had before. And we don't even have to look at the organization as a whole transforming. We can also just look at the small parts. You see here from the Project Management Institute, they find that even if you look into why individual Agile projects fail, one of the most frequent reasons is that we have a culture that does not support agility. So now I found this here from Stanford Social Innovation Review, using organizational culture actually as a tool for change. And I like that very much. The conclusion I want to put forward is, yes, organizational culture is the biggest hurdle, but at the same time, it is the biggest lever in Agile transformations. And today, I hope I can lead you through some aspects here to help us understand exactly what culture is and how we can leverage it. So what is culture anyway? Now, you got to stay with me here. I'm going to tell you a small story. What you see here, and you might have heard about the monkey experiment, but hang on. So you got 4 monkeys here. They are living in a nice little cage. And now imagine yourself, you're a monkey, you're the blue one here, and you get shipped in a container, the door opens, and you are basically pushed into a cage, and you see those 4 monkeys sitting there, wondering what's that all about. And then you see, bam, up there on the very top, and you can see a little string here, but on my slide, there's a little string holding the bananas onto the ceiling. You might be hungry, so you're thinking, oh, nice. I got some bananas up there. That actually looks great. How am I going to get to them? They're a little far up. I can't reach, but guess what? There's a ladder right in front of it. Looks good. So why don't I just take that ladder, get to the bananas? Hold on. What do the others do? They might not. Maybe they're not hungry, or maybe they're not the smartest out there. And stay with me. The ones of you that changed jobs, got in a different department or a different organization, and you see things which don't make sense, you might have had that thought crossing your mind. Maybe they're just not interested in it, or maybe they haven't figured it out yet. So our little monkey, or you in that case, think, why don't I go get the bananas? Approach the ladder, and what happens is attack. Okay, maybe not attack, but the others group around you and definitely hold you back from the ladder. What the hell? I mean, you were prepared to share those bananas, right? However, they don't let you get them. Okay, that's the situation you're in. So you give up on it for now. Maybe you try it tomorrow after you made friends with the other monkeys. But guess what? Tomorrow, the same thing happens. You try to get to the bananas and the others are holding you back. Okay, you start thinking, maybe they have a reason. They've been here longer than you are. So maybe they figured something out, you haven't, but it might be wise to just listen to them and trust that they have their reasons, not to approach those bananas. Now we fast forward a few days, and suddenly the cage door opens one nice day and a new monkey comes in, looks like a nice monkey. Wait, what is this monkey actually looking at? He's staring at those bananas and then the ladder. we gotta react, we gotta protect him and warn him before the others go attack him like they did me. So this new monkey here, you, gonna be the first one who actually prevent that new monkey from getting to the bananas. That's it. We could make a cut right here. What we got to know is the culture of this group of 5 monkeys in that cage. Maybe risk averse, fearful, whatever it is, but we've got to know them now. But of course, since we're not part of the system, we want to know why, what's going on. We haven't given up asking. So the one or the other of you might have heard it. This story is actually based on an experiment that was conducted in 1966 from Stevenson with rhesus monkeys. Was a little different than this tale, but basically the same idea. What had happened is every time those monkeys, the 4 monkeys, tried to get to the banana and would climb the ladder, the researchers had sprayed them with water, what they dislike, strongly dislike. So every time they got sprayed with water, they give up on it. And the reason why they didn't want the new monkey to go up there is they wanted to protect him from that same experience. So they taught him that's not the way, it's not what we're going to do here. Now, this tells you a little bit about how culture works. And what we know from psychology is things. Oh, I do see some nice ideas here. What is this? Culture or tradition, right? Tradition is a part of culture. That's a good point. We might get to that, Karl, later. Or habit, right? All that plays into actually how a culture is formed. It's collective assumptions. It's what have we learned, what works. Habits we create, symbols we create, a shared language. All this is part of the organizational culture. So we established what culture is. Now let's think about what is then different in an agile organization, or what are the specifics of culture in agile organizations. And this is what I spent a lot of time with, researching and trying to find out what is the common denominator between agile companies if we look at their culture. So we go back into this gray box and fill it in with basically 3 letters. We got transparency, we got empowerment, and we got collaboration. This is what I call the Agile Culture Code, the title of my book. These 3 aspects is what sets agile cultures apart, and they are not interchangeable. So you got to have all 3 if you want to have a working agility in your organization. I'm going to lead you through it. I call this the tech model, by the way, for, obviously transparency, empowerment, collaboration. It confuses people because the term is used other ways. So let's go ahead and start off with transparency. Transparency is really the groundwork. That's the basis. People need access to information. They need to know the plans. They need to understand why their work is important and what the effects of their work actually are. If we have that information, we can take informed decisions. The basic of empowerment, the basic of self-steering, self-management in teams. And I do like this quote. Without information, you cannot take responsibility. However, if we provide the information, we cannot avoid responsibility. Providing you some examples to maybe give a little better idea of what's behind those aspects. In the 3 aspects of this element, let's first maybe look at Netflix. Netflix is a company that basically thrives on data. That's what they eat, what they breathe. And what they decided for their company is for nearly every single document to be open and accessible for everyone who is interested. This is the company figures, competitor analysis, whatever you can think of. Everyone can access this information and be able to use it for their own decision making. Now we have Amazon. Amazon has a company-wide customer-centered metric, and that helps employees to understand the effect of their work. So if I'm launching a new marketing campaign, in real time, I can see how the customer is reacting. If I change my approach to something, I can immediately see, okay, is the customer behavior changing? Part of the effect also might not be in direct contact with the customer, but maybe the colleagues. Maybe I'm a supporting function, or I try to support other team members or other departments. Now, effect means I go and get feedback, I collect feedback regularly, so I understand what's really important for those who are impacted in my work to be able to self-steer. This is what it's about. ING is a nice example. What they do, they say the clear side to the customer is extremely important for transparency and decision making. So when they onboard an employee, and it doesn't matter which employee or what function or level, you're going to spend a week in the call center and answer customer calls. So you have the direct link, make the experience to have the direct view to the customers. Those are some examples. And then if we look at Vistaprint and Fidelity, those two are good examples because they like to use a portfolio overview. It's a portfolio funding wall for Fidelity where it's transparent for everyone in the company. It's a board everyone can look at, which shows how funding is distributed between different initiatives and projects, linking and showing how do they relate to the vision, to the strategy, how do they interlink to make sure people understand the funding, but people are also able to see and locate the importance of their work and are able to prioritize how they spend their time with. Vistaprint, same thing, similar. They use a board to basically show, they call it an enterprise visibility room. It's an actual room where they have a visualization or illustrate visualization of all the projects going on, the projects planned in progress, and show how they interlink with each other and how they link to the priorities, strategic priorities, and to the vision. Same idea behind it. This would be transparency about intention, making clear what are the plans, why are decisions taken, as the second component of transparency. Let's move on to empowerment. Now, if I have the opportunity to gather all the information and I can see eye to eye, I'm on the same footing and I'm able to discuss, make my own decisions, set my own priorities. The question is, may I? Am I allowed to make changes? Am I allowed to really self-steer or not? And that is what the empowerment is for. So basically, quoting Vineet Nayar, the former CEO from HCL Technologies, what he said is, let's ask 3 questions to find out what management is actually supposed to do. First of all, what is the business of any corporation? He says, creating value for the customer. Where does this value get created? Where the employees are actually creating the added value. So what is the business of management? That is to empower the employees to do exactly that. And empowerment here again has 3 aspects. We got freedom, enablement, and ownership. Let's give you some examples here as well. There's a small example for freedom. Freedom means to give you the maximum control over your work. Things from where do you work from? Something the crisis now helped us a little bit along the way of having people to also decide when they work, where they work from. That is like the smallest way of freedom you can give to an employee. Now the Ritz-Carlton has an interesting idea here. Again, we get transparency, and the service employees at the Ritz-Carlton are in direct contact with their customers. So they collect a lot of intel. They understand the customer situation, their background, they know a lot about them. And now Ritz-Carlton said, I'm going to give you freedom to make sure we provide the best and most outstanding customer service there is. So each employee is actually having a budget of $2,000 to spend on an individual customer to make them happy. There are great stories that evolved. A lady who jumped on a plane, she followed a customer who had left his laptop with a very important presentation. She flew there, dropped the laptop off, flew right back, got back on her job. That is a small idea of freedom. And freedom basically means that you're taking in the environment, you see what is changing, you see what the competition is doing, what your customers are asking for, if you want to be able to really live agility, which means in that case, react to the changes, then you need freedom to adapt. You need this wiggle room to be able to find time to adapt, but also have the freedom to be creative, have the freedom to experiment, to come up with innovations. You can then try out in your team, you're empowered to do so and make the changes, gather your data and go from there. Another great example is the Morningstar company. You basically have full freedom and are empowered to even define your own job role. If you want to do so, you can just, or you basically have to do so. You negotiate with your colleagues, you see, okay, how do I best contribute my skills, my experience? You negotiate with your co-workers, with your colleagues, what kind of role you're gonna have. And you do that time and time again to make sure you're always creating the value that is most needed. W.L. Gore, another great example. Those are certainly, or they are certainly, or W.L. Gore is certainly one of the most progressive companies that is out there. A material science company. They do have about 10,000 employees worldwide. They have not a single manager. So everything that's decided there is decided on team level or by individuals after consulting colleagues. Let's look at some other examples. I saved Borzog for the last. Spotify basically says, I have it here, don't ask, do, but iterate. Use the iterative approach. For every change you make, you gather data to be able to self-steer and self-correct if you're going in the right direction. If you do that, there's no need to involve a manager to prepare your slides and show the data, ask for approval. Manager's gonna, put their own twist on things. That is all basically a bottleneck, takes too long. So don't ask, do, but verify and inspect and adapt on your own risk. And then Siemens, here you see it small. Siemens Power and Gas, that's an example from Germany. They decided they're going to produce burners in-house again. And they had a big project, waterfall, beautiful, steered by management. And it was just not working. It was so much resistance and everything took longer. It really was, it looked like it won't work to start that in-house production. So they simply turned the tables and said, yes, thank you, Scott, with the Gore remark correctly. In the chat, they said, let's turn the tables and give the powers to the employees. So those employees who were later responsible on working in this in-house productions, they were the one who started organizing everything, who bought the machinery, took all the decisions. Management got in the background, coached where necessary, and left the people going. It turns out the project was completed earlier than they thought. They even saved some money. It was a huge success, living empowerment and really giving ownership to the people end to end. And now one last example about empowerment is Borzog. That's a care company. And the founder had one vision in place when he founded this company. All he wanted was nurses to be able to do their job. So get rid of bureaucracy, get rid of billing pressure and so on. And Borzog now is an organization of self-management teams. They have no managers. They don't even have functions, simply groups of nurses self-organizing around what the customer is needing. It's a huge success story that is now expanding globally. And about expanding, there's one more example. I got it from a research article, so I don't know the exact company, but it was one in sports, and it was a sports manufacturer from France. So they were trying to expand their business in different companies for 40 years, here and there, added another country to their list of customers. And then they decided they're going to try to provide ownership. So they simply said, guys, anyone within our employees, if you have an idea how how to enter the market in a different company. We're going to provide you budget and let you go ahead and do it. It was huge success. They actually managed within 1 year to enter more new countries than they did within the 40 years before. So that is empowerment. It's extremely powerful, and it's a second absolutely necessary component if you want to be agile or have an agile organization. Okay, let's move on from here and look at collaboration. That's pretty self-explanatory in terms on, I like this here, neurons that fire together, they wire together. So if you're thinking about our brain, for humans to be able to think and feel and act, we have 86 billions of neurons which have to communicate together. And the idea, or the way the brain functions, that's called structural plasticity. So what happens is when two neurons are actually communicating, which means if you look in an organization, you reach out to a colleague in a different department, you start collaborating, or you simply just communicate, introduce each other. In our brain, those neurons form a connection, which means next time when that one neuron speaks up and tries to reach this other neuron, it's going to be much faster. And this is what happens in the organization too. You hear a lot about network structures, trying to organize in flexible networks. All that works only if you're actually well connected to other employees and you have the opportunity to go ahead and self-organize in terms of find your own teams, or flexibly use your time to contribute to other teams' works, regardless in which role or for which team it is. So this is the contribution aspect of collaboration. You have the exchange, that's basic. You try to know what's going on in your colleagues' work life. You share your experience, you exchange ideas, share your knowledge. You actually collaborate by contributing together or contributing, helping others, etc. And then you have learning as a third component. Only through collaboration is when you really learn, which is, if you want to look at Agile tools, the retrospective. That is like, yeah, my favorite tool for learning. And we do that in collaboration. When the whole organization does it, we'll finally be able to learn as an organization and make those leaps in our development we wouldn't do if everyone just tries to, reinvent the wheel or make their own experience. Let's look at some examples for collaboration. Mars, I only list here because they invested a lot of money in teamwork, in team workshops to make sure people trust each other and there's good understanding between the team members, and they had all this, but collaboration wasn't happening. And now they conducted some internal studies I find very interesting. And what they found out in the end is they're extremely goal-oriented and performance-focused. So all Mars had to do is to show clear and very detailed how does collaboration help, or is even necessary, to achieve a business goal. Once this was in place and it was clear when collaboration is needed and when not, collaboration worked perfectly. Now, Google I have as an example utilizing technology. If there is a big town hall event, they have real-time technology set up where employees can post questions and employees can vote on how important a specific question is. So within the meeting, the executives can see, okay, this is really what our employees need to know or think or feel, and be able to react on it in real time. And another example is Amazon with their experience that silos, which often hinder the collaboration, that's not only Amazon, that's many companies actually sharing that observation that it is middle management who is maintaining those silos. So he wants to take them out of the loop. The information starts to flow more freely and more completely within the organization, and employees in different silos or former silos, if you will, start collaborating on a natural basis. Yeah, that is the third component of the tech model. So you got all three. And just to give a little better picture of how interlinked those three elements are, if you try to go without one, you're stepping in a big pitfall. Let's look at the warning. So let's say we have a company that is very transparent, information is accessible, people are educated, and there's a huge collaboration going on. People really know each other, they are networked, they love working together. However, they come up with the best ideas together, they see opportunities to collaborate and try to save money or even resources, dig in together to achieve something quicker, full of ideas and opportunities, but they are not empowered. They're going to simply wear out. You got an organization that is extremely transparent and empowers their people, but collaboration isn't happening or is not encouraged or not allowed even because of very strict role descriptions. We end up having a company where the individuals might be very successful, but they can only reach a certain limit, because if people don't start sharing and putting together their brains, they won't be able to deal with the requirements the market is getting you for connected products, for complexity. So we got the lone warriors, which, you know, are fine, but they're not going to hit the mark. They're not going to stay competitive as an organization as a whole. If we have the organization with very empowered people and a great collaboration in place, this is a very lively company, a company that has lots of energy, a lot of things are done, crazy, many initiatives, probably like, and a huge amount of projects going on at the same time. However, transparency is missing. People aren't informed about strategic priorities, about changes in plans, and so on. They don't have access to real data. They ending up, being in a blind flight together, but it's still a blind flight. So maybe these imbalance warnings, show a little bit of the picture of what happens if we think we can neglect the one or the other. So what now? We figured out the Agile culture code. Do we now have to change our mindset? Mindset to me is a trigger word. I don't really like it. And do we have to change our mindset? I do not think so. If we look at what I just described, those three components, I bet that none of you were completely surprised by one or the other or said, hey, that's something I've never done before. And that is pretty simple. These are psychological conditions to be successful, especially in uncertainty, especially if you have to take decisions in environments that are fast changing and need you to adapt. So what I want you to just think about it right now is, if you think about your past, a project where you've been especially successful could have been just something you did in your private time, something personal, or at work. It was probably done the tech way, if you want. So I have a goal in mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to gather information like this little frog here. I make sure I have the big picture. I use the globe. I make sure I have all my data in place. I have my eyes and my ears open. So along the way, once I started working, I'm not going to lose touch, and I'm not going to, I will still go ahead, get feedback, and try to orient myself along the way. Then when I get started, I choose the way, I choose what I'm doing and how I'm doing. What kind of tools do I need to actually do my work? How is my objective is actually forming? What exactly is the objective I'm choosing to reach the goal? What way? How do I get there? And I find people that support me hands-on, or might give me advice or challenge me. That is pretty natural. So tech is actually what we do every day when we can, if we have all the opportunities, we have that green field. So my message I want to get out there is, no, we don't have to change people or our mindset. What we have to do is we have to create organizations that enable people to solve problems the way we solve problems when we're at our best. And what we try to encourage organizations or customers to do is to just operate by asking yourself simple questions. So it could be starting your own project or a new project or reorganizing a department or transforming an organization, looking at ourselves and at all the employees we would like to empower. Do we have the overview and all the information we need to make decisions? Do we have the clear view of the customer or whoever is impacted by our work? Are we empowered to self-organize and self-steer? Do we have the freedom to be creative, to play at work, and to be able to wiggle so we can adapt? And is it possible for us to take end-to-end responsibility, at least in some defined area? And the third one is asking ourselves, do we have the network we need? And asking, do we provide others the flexibility they need to be able to contribute where they add the most value? And the way we collaborate, do we establish psychological safety to reflect and grow together? Empathy here, what Gail said, would be a very big part of that third component or third question we're posting. So the question is, what can you do? I have 2 minutes left, but maybe we give it a little shot. So look at this tech wheel, and we just use the chat function that's in front of you. You can just start typing, stepping up, taking actions. What are things you could do, you could act right now to increase transparency, data information, transparency with intentions and plans, or transparency of knowing what the effects your work actually have. Just put in some ideas if you want. Create a shared intention. Show the ideas behind the backlog, right? And there's something we see that it's constantly neglected. It happens to all of us. If we start communicating or sharing an idea, we usually forget to also share what caused that idea, or what were my thoughts, what's the background. Very nice. Stop leader committing a timeline. Yeah, stepping up. Let me add some quick ideas for you to take home as well. So if we're looking at data and information, I'm reviewing the chat if anyone would like to add something. One really simple thing is to try, at least, to have an analysis of what information can you access and which information or data might be helpful, but is not accessible to you right now. How can you get there? Show the vision exactly to create the effect. Very nice. Intention, tell the whole story. That's what we just had. Also behind the backlog here in your comment. Measure, observe the work's impact. So try to find ways to get feedback, to find data that tell you something about how your work was received, what the quality of your work is, if you're working on the right things, etc. And yourself, please provide feedback to others. Make sure others get that transparency with their work from you as a receiver of their work. Okay, let's move on. Empowerment, freedom, enablement, ownership. Any ideas? What's important here? Just put it in the chat if you want. Allow workers to select the work. Very nice. Which usually also comes along with people are highly motivated in what they're doing, and we usually tend to pick what we also are pretty confident we can succeed with. Can you repeat the question? So empowerment, same idea. If we look at increasing the freedom at work, the enablement, so people are actually able to take their decisions and to act on them, and taking ownership. Quick ideas, quick hacks if you want, what you can do. 80-20 rule. Empowerment as your North Star, yeah. A hackathon, right? That would be a good example of how we get it, like living it or having it in practice. let me add some things. For yourself, make sure that you set time apart for playing. You either have a sandbox if you're a software developer. If not, you got to create your own sandbox. Opportunities to play. I get the servant leadership very well. Push the boundaries. If we don't know where our boundaries are at work, that means we've never pushed the limits. We never tried to even cross it. And another idea is 1 week, 1 rule down, if you can, within your scope. And then leading with empathy, right? And then there is the question of servant leadership, if that relates to empowerment. Yes, absolutely. If you have empowered teams, empowered employees, your role as a leader is to be a servant. They don't need you. They can work out their vision. You basically have to like step out of the way and let the people do what they do best. And now some other examples for enablement. Set yourself up for success. That means before you even take over responsibility, look at the tech model. Are you really prepared? Do you have the access to the information? Do you really are authorized to take decisions or get other people on board and so forth? So make sure you don't end up in one of those pseudo empowerments where you really are accountable but not empowered to do anything. And you self-empower others. There is this rule, or you can use the rule saying, if it doesn't hurt, allow it. So if you interact with colleagues, stop micromanaging them, first of all. Pushing decision-making downward, exactly, or sharing it, being transparent with the results, great. That would actually would be a transparency and empowerment combined. Brave, what you just said. And then for ownership, try to take initiative, see how you can advance the organization or your area, and try to come up with an end-to-end idea how you could control it, from the idea to the execution to following up, gathering feedback. And again, try to let others take ownership. If they do something to help you, give them the full ownership to get that job done. Okay, and lastly, collaboration. You can add some ideas. It's a short on time. Just going to present a few here. Do you have any concerns? Okay, we'll get to that question in a moment. Collaboration is exchange. There are sweet little things like a lunch roulette, or just try to expand your network. Maybe 1 week, one colleague as an idea, to meet a different colleague every week. Allow all voices, very good. Take turns to engage, great. That has a lot to do with inclusion as well, but also, yeah, really sharing and interchanging roles with each other. Then if we look at contribution, find a way to utilize your talent, not to fill in your role, do your job, but to actually utilize what you have, what you bring. Usually, honestly, our CVs are so much longer than our current job description. So try to make use of it. Add value, don't do your job. And for learning, I have another 1 week idea, 1 week, one improvement for yourself or for your team. And of course, openly also talking about your failures and learning, engaging with others in that regard as well. Okay, so let's see. This is messed up again. Here are my books, the 2 recent ones. And if you want, note down the Linktree thing. It's just Dr. Stefanie in the end, and you find all my social media contacts. And then I find a question here in the chat. Scott, Karl, I'm just going to move on to the question. So who posted that? Terrence. Oh, this is a private message. Okay. Terrence, would you like to ask the question for everyone?
Yeah, I don't mind. I was just concerned with all this sharing of information and being self-managed and independence, and giving of data to information companies. Any concerns about intellectual property? Any more talk about that within company? I know the current status of it now, but just in lieu of a lot of changes. Any talk about that in terms of ideas?
I'm not really sure what your question is pointing at. I mean, there are concerns with the transparency, for example. If you really share even sensitive documents with everyone in the organization, of course, you have a risk of people leaking it outside of the organization. And in fact, it happens. But companies which are confronted with these kind of concerns, like Netflix, for example, they say, let's face it, it would happen anyway. You can't prevent derailment, you can't prevent bad behavior. So, and there, based on at least the experience, it's not that once you share it, you'll find it somewhere else immediately. So it doesn't seem to encourage people to abuse that form of transparency. If that was what
yeah, well, I know that, you know, as an employee, you don't own your own ideas, the company does. So I'm talking about more from the employee side, you know, with putting out all this information and new ways of working and this independence and self-management kinds of things. That's what I was asking my question in regards to any talk of, you know, people talking about, you know, how they want to, you know, own or have rights to their own ideas. That's the question.
So, I see. So you're saying, well, if I'm self-organized and self-managed and I come up with an idea, it's mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more in that direction.
Yeah, makes sense. But as far as what I'm seeing, companies are not changing their rules based on that. They say, hey, great, you might be able with those new circumstances to come up with more ideas, but you still do it on my payroll. So ideas are still mine. And I actually haven't come across, oh, I have a spelling mistake here. I haven't come across of any people trying to introduce it or companies living this kind of framework. This would create a big issue.
So can I just add in there, there's two sides to IPR. There's the invention, and then there's the ethical rights. So most employees maintain their own ethical rights unless they give it away as part of their contracts. So you still have rights about your ideas. You always have had.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, also the originator, that's how we call it in German, of a content, sure. I mean, these things are in place. I haven't seen any company changing those rules only because they introduce a more self-steering or more self-organizing. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
So I've got a question for both of you, because you both kind of agreed a stance without, I don't know if you realized it or not, you both agreed that management still exists in an agile future. Or leadership. So does it?
Well, what the tech model is about is trying to illustrate how an organization can run without managers. And
okay.
the companies I looked at, some of them do not have any managers. If you look at Morningstar, for example, they don't exist. You got a founder and an owner, and under that you just have people filling roles. So no, I don't think leadership is required in an agile organization, but I also don't think it harms the agile organization, to be honest. If you have leaders in place that live agile principles, or we had the comment from one of you, you know, putting servant leadership in as an idea. I believe that agile organizations who actually remain some hierarchy, maybe a little more flat or even not, they can still be successful if managers learn, you know, to delegate. If they actually respect self-organization, then I mean, my personal experience is hierarchy.
Yeah, if I could interject there, I think everyone is a leader in an agile environment. So the expectation and the living of the agile culture is that it's very coactive in terms of that everyone is empowered to be a leader. Some organizations still have hierarchy in place. You know, they can't change, especially if they're a large organization. So there's still organizations that have CEOs and directors and VPs and all of that are doing agile transformation. But the core of it is that you're creating the, you know, the self-empowered teams that everyone has the equal buy-in and is equally responsible at the end of the day, and in turn, then they're more productive.
Okay, thanks.
Trying to respond in the chat.
Can I just say a quick note on Stephanie, I used to work for WL Gore.
You do?
And-
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say, because I saw you had them in the empowerment section, and for me, the overriding thing about WL Gore, even back in the 90s, was there were no managers, and if you said the word manager, you were potentially in trouble. That said, the product leadership per sport or per category for that fabric section was incredibly focused and very fast and singular in their decision making. And that was the strongest feeling, having been a Gore associate myself.
Mhm.
That was the override. And then they had 80-20 rule and other things. But actually, the role of, they had very strong leadership, and not all of it was people leadership.
Mhm.
Some of they were still people associates, but they were, the product specialist wasn't a title, it was a functional role. That the product specialist would say, we are not investing in waterproofs for that sport. We will do windproof for that sport, we won't. So there was a dynamic of some decisions were almost unquestionable in a completely flat management structure with no managers. So I think actually that mirrored much more the Apple environment of very focused, clear, fast decision making at a product level, but with a complete separation at the human level.
Yep.
Hopefully that's helpful. I'm sorry for stealing your minutes.
No, not at all. I love to hear from that. All I've read about the company is like, you really just want to go work there because it's so energizing. So just confirm that.
So are there any last questions from anyone else? Any statements from either of our speakers?
No, thank you for the opportunity. I think it was a good session. I enjoyed Dr. Stefanie's as well. So I think this turned out to be a good event. Really appreciate the invite.
Great.
Yeah, this is really great, deeply foundational stuff that gets at really the core of what this is supposed to be all about. It's not necessarily the technical stuff, even though those things are important, but this is how you be rather than just do at the team level and beyond. Really like this.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's great. Sorry, Stephanie.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop recording now, but we can carry on chatting if you'd like.